to the Indian hosts for arranging for a separate event on gender equality. We think this is such an important issue to tackle within the clean energy transition, and thank you to all of you who have shown so much commitment to this cause. My name is Ainsley Emerson, and I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Energy Policy at Natural Resources Canada. I have the pleasure of emceeing this event. There has been a slight change. Unfortunately, Sabine Mitte from Austria was not able to join us this morning. She sends her regrets. We all know that women play a pivotal role in driving a just, equitable, and inclusive energy transition. Nevertheless, the energy workforce is still very dominated by men, and women are underrepresented or facing inequalities. We have the opportunity today to talk about solutions and also to celebrate the progress that we have made in the past 5 years since the Equal by 30 campaign was launched. We have many excellent speakers lined up for you, providing opening and scene-setter remarks, and a panel that will dive deep into specific questions so that our panelists can share their wisdom and their experiences, and we can learn from that. I'm also going to have the pleasure of inviting Canada's Assistant Deputy Minister of Strategic Policy and Innovation to this stage to share remarks on Equal by 30's 5-year anniversary and a new tool that we have for all signatories and others who are interested in addressing gender equality. We also have the pleasure that Jean-François Gagné, the new chair of the Clean Energy Ministerial Secretariat, will be coming on stage to speak to the CEM Secretariat's interest in this work. And I would invite you to stay right to the end. We have an interactive networking session, a great opportunity to connect with your colleagues further and to get into the questions that the panelists have also addressed. With that, it is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage our first speaker. Demilola Ogunbi is the Special Representative to the UN Secretary General and CEO for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair UN Energy. I'm sure she does not need these introductions, but for those of you who haven't had the pleasure to hear her speak before. With Demilola at the helm, SC for All has entered into working relationships with over 200 partners, supported over 90 countries globally, and secured commitments of more than $600 billion in energy finance. Congratulations. Please, if you would join me on stage now. Oh, Demi. Yes, please.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please bear with me. I'm slightly jet-lagged, but I just applaud you guys to please listen to this very important topic, because gender, especially for an African woman in my role, is very, very important as we foresee the future in the energy transition. So it is an honor for me to stand before all of you to discuss this crucial topic. This is a pivotal moment for women in the just and equitable, inclusive energy transition. At Sustainable Energy for All, we firmly believe that a clean energy transition cannot be done without inclusivity and without women. We've seen from many organizations we've worked with that the women-led organizations, especially in decentralized energy, are doing better than the men-led organizations. This is actually a data fact. Transitions of any sorts are complicated, but it offers an opportunity to either narrow or expand the biases and injustices that prevail the current order. To date, the energy sector has 76% fewer women than men, a disparity significantly greater than the 8% gender gap in the total global workforce. Furthermore, women in the sector earn approximately 15% less than men for exactly the same jobs. Frankly, this is unacceptable, and we must urgently address these barriers, limiting women's participation, and work together to remove them. On this note, I'd like to go off script and talk about a personal view that I had. I used to be the head of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria, and we had a 550 million clean energy program deploying solar mini grids and solar home systems in Nigeria. And one of the things we put in the program was any company had to have 40% women participation, not just at the admin level, where there's always a lot of women, but also at the managerial level. And then finally at the workforce. And what happened was a lot of companies said, we just don't know women, which is quite amusing in a country of 200 million people. So what we did is we trained women. We trained STEM women for universities just before they finished their degrees, and we trained managerial level women. And we then did a roadshow and say, here are the women. This is very important because it's not for us as women to dial down our ambition. It is for men to approach it, but for us to really have the ease of doing business to make sure it happens. Fast forward, I guess, wow, 8 years now. I'm really proud to say there are over 100 companies in my country that are women-led, and some of them have done their Series A, Series B, Series C. But more importantly, we took 600 young girls from rural communities where I had to physically climb a ladder to show their fathers that climbing a ladder to put a solar panel was safe. I was very petrified at the time, but I had to show this. I'm saying all of this because sometimes we forget the extra mile, the little things we have to do to give another woman a chance. I'm very unapologetic at SE4All that we always have to have 55% women at any point in our staff quota. Again, this is meant with a few resistance sometimes, and we also have a youth quota. Again, we as women in these positions, it's not always going to be like this. We're not going to have this amazing crop of women, like Guri here, who's a mentor to me, at the helm of these things. So we have to look back and say, what did we do while we were here? And one of the things about development that I love so much is that you have to touch another human being and affect their life of someone you might never meet. If you do not think like that, there's no point being in this room. And that's how we have to think about the women. It is absolutely absurd that we still have women dying from clean cooking. So as a woman who wants to provide food for her family, she's smoking the equivalent of 3 packs of cigarettes, which we banned because we haven't given clean cooking. And then we wonder why it's the 4th largest death on a continent. I'm saying all of this, and I think my team will kill me because I'm not reading their wonderful speech, because there's so much power in this room. There's so much power within ourselves. There's so much power within our networks. And I plead all of you never to take impossible as a task and to just encourage yourself because you're such wonderful women and there are credible men in this room that are also enabling women to do amazing things. So thank you so much for listening.
That was a very powerful start and certainly a call to action for all of us, for women, and for our allies. Next up, I'm welcoming to the stage Lee McDonough. She's the Director General of Net Zero Nuclear and International at the Department of Energy and Net Zero in the United Kingdom. She's responsible for delivering the UK's Net Zero program, as well as leading on international climate policy. She'll be setting the scene for the rest of our discussion this morning.
Thank you, and morning everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Firstly, can I say thank you to our Indian hosts for putting on this event. It's such a great thing to be doing. And thank you to you. It's just a fantastic introduction. I think what you've done is really, by sharing your personal reflections and your personal story, you've set the scene for us, you set the challenge for us. And what I took away from what you said is this is about personal responsibility. And I think that's a great way to sort of start this event. So I take your challenge and we'll reflect on it throughout the rest of the event. So just back to my script. It doesn't seem that long ago since we were all in Rio having a conversation, and so I'm really glad to be here today to carry on the conversation about gender equality. And unfortunately, some of the things I'm going to say from my perspective in the UK show we haven't actually made that much progress since last year or earlier in the year, which again means we need to do that call to arms to really, really focus on shifting the dial. So the UK is a strong advocate for advancing gender equality and diversity in all sectors, but especially in the energy sector, which is very close to my heart. Because we know that a gender-diverse energy sector is vital for driving energy transitions all over the world, and we need to encourage more women to work in energy and improve opportunities for those that are already in the sector to thrive. However, as we've already heard, it's clear that women are not always being given the same opportunities to thrive, and we already know that women aren't reaching the top positions in the sector and that progress in changing this is really slow. So I'll give you some examples from my perspective in the UK. We had a report recently by Powerful Women, which is the UK professional initiative that tracks representation of women in the top of the UK's energy sector. And it shows that women occupied 29% of energy board seats, a rise of only 2 percentage points from last year. That's in the rounding, it's not a real change. 16% of executive roles in the UK energy sector are held by women, only 1% higher than last year. And then 3/4 of the top UK energy companies have no women executive director positions. 74%, we've gone down versus 75% in 2022. And 21% of energy companies still have no women on their board at all. So, the challenge is significant. It's not where we want to be. It's not where we should be. And so going forward, we need to do much, much more, take action to really shift the dial and see some change. So the UK, we're really committed to helping more women and girls into this vitally important sector. We're trying to really focus on breaking down perceived barriers as well as real barriers to working in the energy sector through boosting and focusing on STEM skills, through our Build Back Better campaigns, which seek to inspire people from all walks of life to work in the green economy and raise awareness of green education, training and careers. We know that there's a real lack of data in this field. It's one of the things that hampers us. And so through the Green Jobs Delivery Group, we are exploring what actions can be taken across the industry to improve diversity, but also improve the data collection and transparency of the data so we can see where the problems really are and really understand where to intervene. We're very proud to be signatories of the Equality in Energy Transitions Initiative and the Equal by 30 campaign to support work to close the pay gap, improve female representation in senior roles, and widen opportunity for women in the global clean energy sector by 2030. Both of those endeavours are going to be really critical in ensuring in the future the energy sector is fairer, more flexible, more diverse, and hopefully in the future when we come together again, we will see a shift in those numbers. But we clearly need, obviously, to do a lot more to collaborate internationally as well as our focus on our domestic agendas to find solutions and encourage more young women into the sector and help those into the sector already in the sector to remain and to thrive. And we need to ensure that we have all the skills and talents we need to enable us to achieve the energy transition. So events like this are so important that we've got a chance to share our experiences and our personal stories and to actually debate and engage so we can all go back re-energized to focus again on shifting that dial. So thank you again for asking me to participate, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. And I can say that as the UK hosted its G7 presidency, we certainly saw a very strong commitment, and we were able to advance gender equality throughout the energy track. So that was a really excellent example of international collaboration. So we'll be moving to our panel discussion now, and I'll invite to the stage Julie Cicada from the United States. She is currently the chair of Mission Innovation Steering Committee, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of International Affairs. Julie previously served as the Executive Director of the U.S. Climate Alliance. If you'd like to join us now, and we can have our panelists join us on stage.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of CEM and MI. I'm just so inspired already by our two opening speakers, and so just want to recognize them as, powerful, influential women who are really helping to set the standard for what many of us are striving for. So thank you for those terrific opening remarks. One thing I wanted to take the liberty of sort of speaking to at the very beginning for a second is also just the great work we're doing through the Equality Initiative, recognizing also Annette and our Canadian colleagues and a lot of the effort that they've put into leading that. One of the work streams is our ambassadors program, and that's where we're trying to recruit more women from around the world to really be able to showcase their leadership, to get them on stage to tell their story. This year, we've been able to recruit 22 women from around the world as our first cohort, which is really exciting. And we do really have representation. Just wanted to also thank our colleagues, Leah from the Department of Energy, who has really been doing all the work in the background to make sure that that can happen. So for today, we have an amazing panel of 6 women who are representing our youth, the business community, IGOs, government. So I'm going to welcome them on stage one by one, and I'll ask them to come and take their seats. First, we have Gauri Singh, who is the Deputy Director General for the International Renewable Energy Agency. Next, may I invite Barbara Kaufman, the Director for Employment and Social Governance Analysis at the Directorate General for Employment at the European Commission. Thank you. Jennifer Holmgren, the CEO of Lanza Tech. Ishita Yadav, who's the South Asia focal point for SDG 7 Youth Constituency. Asta Gupta, Lead India Analyst and Coordinator from the IEA. And Vibha Dhawan, Director General for the Energy and Resources Institute at TERI. All right, and so we're going to have 2 questions that we're going to pose to our panelists. And then at the end of this conversation, we're going to open it up to Q&A from our audience. Let me sort of propose our 2 questions from here. So for the first panelists, based on your professional and lived experiences, what persistent structural barriers have you identified that really hinder women's inclusion in the energy workforce? And related to that, how have these barriers impacted your access to opportunities and advancement in the sector, or sort of the women that you've seen in your community? What have been those barriers? And what I'll do is maybe start at the end, and then we'll work our way this way.
Thanks, Julie. It's great to be in a panel with great co-panelists. And even though it's early morning, but I can see a lot of interested people in the room, which is great. I think the real setting the stage was done by our 2 speakers who came in before our panel, and they've really given us a great segue into what I want to say here today. But before I do that, I just want to say that I was just wondering as you were speaking about the Equality in Energy Transitions Initiative, and I think at IRENA with our new Director General who came in with a stated clear intentionality of having at least 50% women in the organization. And I was just wondering why we haven't still joined, so I'd be happy to have IRENA as a part of that initiative. I mean, I'm not sure if you take in organizations, but we can also have some great women who are there to be a part of the work that you're doing. In terms of structural barriers, I think it's really a mindset issue. And as a lot of us women would know, if we are here in this, in this forum talking about energy, being a part of this energy sector, then it's a lot about what's the kind of mindset that we grew up with? What is it that our parents really imparted? Was there some kind of a bias that got built in towards softer sectors that women should go towards, or did we have the freedom to really go and really explore our potential the way we wanted to? So I think it really starts there. It starts with what is the kind of value system that you've seen in the family as growing up. But that apart, I think, in terms of the conventional energy sector, which was pretty much dominated by men, and we tend to compare, the new emerging energy system with that. And I think that's wrong because, I can give you this data about renewables now having about 30% women, and feel very happy about it. So we have 1/3 women as compared to the oil and gas sector, which has about 22%. But that's not a comparison that we should be making. We should be actually looking at, sectors like the healthcare or the sectors like education, where women have felt that they can really make their mark and have, come and occupied a space and leadership positions. Why is it that we can't be looking at those sectors to see how women can, be a part of this growing sector, just as they are in what are considered safe sectors or considered very sectors which are, happier having women in the new energy that we are talking of, because this is renewable energy is so different from the conventional centralized energy. It's a whole new mindset that's driving this forward. And this is really the opportunity to be able to get more women interested in this, because it pretty much lends itself to a much more flexible system of operating. At this point, I also want to bring in one aspect on which Irina is working, which is looking at the how do you get this renewable decentralized energy into productive uses, whether it's in the agriculture, whether it's in healthcare. And that's where we are finding that, suddenly a lot of my colleagues who had a very different notion of who were really the farmers. And when they went into the field, they realized that it's really the women who do most of the farming jobs. And that's whom we need to get these sustainable, affordable, clean energy solutions, whether it's for irrigation, whether it's for post-harvest technologies. And I don't think we should forget that. So there's this whole formal sector, which I think it's great, and we should aim higher and not compare ourselves with the old conventional oil and gas sector, which is very different from what this new energy system is. And second, let's not forget the larger community of women that are in the fields, doing the farming, looking at the elderly and the children, because that's how the world is evolving. You are now looking at rural areas where the men have gone away into the urban areas, and they are really left looking at the family, and they need to also be provided clean energy solutions that can increase their productivity, but also give them much more time free for doing other things. Thanks.
Thank you for the great opening remarks to this panel. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ishita Yadav. So I think, as we all know, active engagement of women in SDG 7 efforts is vital to achieving a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient energy transition. Over the next 15 years, women, especially young women, will directly influence the outcome of SDG 7 goals as a key driver for its successful implementation. And gender parity has so many benefits. It facilitates a paradigm for change by fostering much needed innovation, advancing sustainable leadership, and promoting equality. In my experience at the SDG 7 youth constituency, some of the key barriers that young women and women in general still face include accessing quality education and training opportunities, acquiring finance, and securing meaningful employment opportunities in the clean energy space, preventing them from leading, participating, and benefiting from the sustainable energy transition. Moreover, women, especially from the global south and from climate vulnerable communities, are often still overlooked in policy and decision-making processes. There have been great strides have been taken, but there is still that gap, and work still needs to be done to ensure that these women also have a seat at the table. And these women are more than capable. They're actively involved in their communities, and they have a very strong commitment to addressing and advancing Agenda 2030. And in my experience, gender parity is especially disparate in sectors like wind and nuclear energy. And this occupational segregation is yet another barrier to women's inclusion. And this can be attributed to various challenges experienced by women working in male-dominated industries. And obstacles include societal expectations, beliefs about women's leadership abilities, lack of mentoring and career development opportunities, and even, unfortunately, sexual harassment. So these are still issues that are very, very prevalent today. And women are also often indirectly excluded from professional and networking opportunities. And this may be due to challenges with juggling family caregiving responsibilities alongside professional commitment. And as we all know, networking plays an absolutely crucial role in career progression, as these opportunities can act as powerful informal mechanisms for advancement within the energy sector. However, once women become mothers, they often face challenges in fully taking advantage of these professional development and networking opportunities, particularly compared to their male counterparts. And as we all know, the data is out there. Mothers, even those who are married, still bear a larger burden of household and childcare tasks compared to fathers. And with societal expectations and traditional gender norms perpetuating unequal distribution of domestic duties, barriers persist despite great strides in gender equality. So I think it's all time that we look inside into our own homes and do some reflection on that. So during my time at the SDG 7 youth constituency, I've seen countless young women battle a multitude of overlapping barriers in efforts to realize their goals and aspirations. So intersectionality is another issue that's been discussed a lot these days, but it's really important to understand that it isn't usually just one barrier or the other. It's like a combination of different barriers that overlap and intersect and manifest themselves in very interesting challenges. And I think no survey or analysis would be able to quite understand the complexity of some of the barriers that young women face right now. But it shouldn't be like this. To achieve a robust transition in line with SDG 7 targets, it is absolutely crucial to address these barriers to create more equitable and supportive environment for women, especially in the clean energy workforce, as there's so many benefits of having just a more equitable and diverse workforce. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. I would like to thank Equality Initiative, first of all, for having me here at this panel. Great to be there where there are dignitaries, leaders in this field. So very honored to be here. I would like to first of all say that I work with the IEA as their India coordinator, and I'm super proud to say that our entire India desk team is all women team. And this is also thanks to the IA's Gender Diversity Initiative. Thank you. And I have my colleague Hannah Chambers as well there. So, of course, we've been discussing about barriers, but there's a long way to go. There's a lot of learning that I would just touch about some of the real life experiences that I have experienced during my university days or my professional experience. I think one of the key barriers that I felt was, coming from an educational degree which doesn't match with your subsequent degree, is also a challenge, because you've been seen as a person who's not an engineer, so to say. So you've been labeled or typecast as somebody who's worked in a different area, and you're trying to transition to another area in your subsequent degree. So having these cross-cutting profiles, especially in the Indian universities, also a challenge. And then, your professors just look at you as like, okay, maybe you're not at the right place, or you cannot do things. So I think that's one of the barriers that I have faced in my life. Even during my professional experience, I would say there is definitely a lack of recognition and acceptance of, what women can perform in their teams at par with men. So sometimes you're also discouraged and not to take new and challenging roles. But I think with all of these barriers, there was always a learning for me. Because when I saw that, my team members or the leaders are, they were men, were not supporting me for the work that I've been doing, and they were not appreciating or recognizing, I thought of doing something different to build my skill set in another area. Again, that was also discouraged. But I think opening up yourself and speaking up is very important, so that you can come out of that whole challenging atmosphere. And I think every barrier can lead into an opportunity and learning. So that's what I've learned from my personal experience. And then women like us, whichever background we come from, it could be engineering or economist, this is very important that some sort of mentoring within the organization needs to be done, which is definitely very much lacking, when you talk about the Indian organizations. So I think, moving forward, it's important that we understand within the teams how, what are the challenges or the barriers that the members are facing. We recognize it, we encourage them, and make them, move from the current block where they're to the next level. So I think that's very important. The other challenges, barriers that a lot of my colleagues faced was also, they were given more of the soft roles in the organization, more of the administration roles, even though they had, engineering degrees. But they were also facing the same challenge, because it's a perceived barrier that they won't be able to travel to, different parts of the country, to rural areas. They think that, that's a job for men. That's not for women. So they've been just given some roles which were very much, just prepare a proposal and don't go to the field. So I think these have been some barriers that I've in real time I've experienced it. But I think those women have broken the barriers, because they've thought that, we have to come out of this environment, and now every one of them is doing very well in their own field. So I think the most important learning for me was to stand up, to discuss these barriers within our groups, to come out of it, take challenging roles, and move forward. And I think the barriers will definitely be broken. And then I will just leave you with one of the work that the IEA does under their Gender Diversity Initiative, looking at the Gender and Data Explorer that they have come up with, which says that the employment in energy sector, the wages for female employees is almost 20% lower than that of the male employees, with a gap greater than in the non-energy sector. So I think this is very important to recognize that higher shares of women have been seen to drop out of the energy sector and move to non-energy sectors. And energy sector being more cross-cutting, it is just not about engineering or economist degree, it is also about science, innovation, financing, there's so much cross-cutting in this clean energy transitions that if we let women stay here and support them and recognize their efforts, I'm sure they can do wonders. I'll just stop here. Thanks.
And so I'm just doing a quick time check. I think we've got about 10 minutes, and so I'm going to ask our next three speakers to be a little bit more brief on the barriers, in part because what I really want to focus this discussion on is how do we actually address the barriers? So you're seeing this in your professional, your personal lives, your own lived experience. What are the challenges, but also what have you seen as some of the tools that either you've been using or that you've seen used that are actually helping us to address this?
No worries. I think, yeah, you can hear me now. I want to just take a step back and tell you a little bit about myself, just because I want you to understand. I was born in Colombia, on the coast of Colombia. I dreamed that I would be an astronaut someday because, like everybody else, I grew up in the 60s and I saw man go to the moon, and I felt I could go to the moon too. When I was 14, I knew I wanted to be a scientist, and I remember finally meeting somebody I thought would understand that. And I told him I wanted to be a chemist and a chemical engineer, and he laughed at me. He actually laughed at me and told me I was a woman, and this was not something that I could possibly ever conceive of doing. Since that time, I got a PhD in chemistry. I did a postdoc. I led what was then a division of Honeywell to start the renewable energy business. I showed that you could take and make aviation fuel from something other than fossil carbon. 5 years later, we took a flight supersonic with sustainable aviation fuel. I then became the CEO of a startup company, a venture-backed clean tech company. There were no women CEOs at that time. I raised $700 million for that company to enable it to literally build refineries. And I took that company public, the first carbon capture and sequestration and utilization company in the world to be listed on a public market. So, if somebody tells you you can't do it, just ignore them. You can do anything you want to do. But more importantly than you believing in yourself and what you can do, you need everybody to believe in you and what you can do. And that's the hard part. And that is why, as a room sitting here, I want to go through some of the barriers, and I want you to think about how you can help the next woman or the next group of women. The first thing I would say is you need mentors. So don't be afraid to tell people what you've done, because everybody will tell you you can't raise capital for a company if you're a woman, but you can, and you need to make sure people know that. I had mentors when I was growing up. When I first started working, there was a lady called Mary Good. She led a technology group. She was the only woman, and I got to observe her doing that. She didn't have to sit and talk to me. She didn't have to help me. But by observing her, I knew what was possible. So you all need to become mentors. And more importantly, when there are women in your organization that you believe can be mentors, don't let them sit back. Push them forward, because that allows a whole group of other women to see them being leaders and to become then the next role models for the next generation. So keep pushing them forward. The other thing you can do as leaders is women generally step back rather than step forward at a meeting. You'll have one woman in a group of 4. All the men will gladly give their opinion, and the woman never will. Call on her, because she has ideas and she has things to say. Make sure that if you're in a position of leadership, or even if you're not, even if you're in a peer, stop the conversation and say, what do you think? Make sure that her voice is heard, because then next time you won't have to call on her. She'll know that her voice can be heard, and she'll step forward. And then the last thing I would ask you to do is think about in your company or in your organization how you enable the men to be caregivers. Because the other barrier that women always face is that they're always the caregivers. They're always the ones that have to help the children. So many women stepped away from the workforce during COVID because the children were all at home. And so they had to be the ones helping. When the parents are ill, they had to be the ones helping. So make it possible for the men to also be able to help, to have it be accepted that they help. At our company, we provide paternity leave, not just maternity leave, so that the men can also know that they can take care of the children, and the women they're partners with can spend more time in the workforce. And then you start to set examples. You show the company, you show the men, you show the women that their role is also in the home. It's not always just at work. So I believe we ourselves can help women step forward by doing things. I don't know whether that's a complete list. I know it's not, but I'm just giving you a few examples. Always think about how you can help others be able to do anything and everything they choose to do.
Maybe just very quickly, but just one thing that you said that sort of struck me is thinking about all the women who've had to leave the workforce during COVID to take care of their families. I think especially for many of us who are hiring managers, keeping that in mind when we're looking at resumes, right? And so if you see women who have a gap in their resume because they had to leave the workforce, there's still so much value there, but we have to invest in that, and we have to be able to find a path forward for that. So I just want to thank you for raising that, because I do think that as we've come out of the health crisis, that we've forgotten that there's a huge share of the population that is still trying to recover and come back into the workforce after that. And I will say the organizers have very graciously given us an extra 15 minutes, so thank you for that.
So good morning, and thanks to the Indian hosts and to the members of the Equality and Energy Transition for having this panel and having me in the panel. I think with the European Commission are completely committed to gender equality. We have a gender equality strategy, and we see, not only because we have it in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, because we are really convinced of the great value added that women have for the labor force, for society, and the opportunities that they should have in life. I would just mention a few numbers. In the EU, generally we have 47% women in the labor force, but when you look in energy, it's 27%. Renewables, 32%. But it's still extremely low, and worldwide we know the numbers are 16%, so totally unacceptable, I would say. And also if you look at startups in energy, 11% women. How can that be, I can say. So then, indeed, looking at the hurdles, we have on the one hand the skills, and on the other hand other hurdles in the labor market. And on the skills, for instance in the EU, 31% of girls and women go into STEM subjects, and also go more into training, technical training, 31%. I know in India it's 42%, but we are really still not where we should be, and I think this is a key issue. I heard earlier Gori say that, okay, there are issues also of mindset, and there's indeed an UNESCO study that talks about social, cultural, gender norms still playing a huge role in where girls go in terms of studying, and this is something that, you know, we really have to address, and especially parents with lower educational background tend to push the girls outside of the technical jobs. At the same time, we also have to say that education systems can play a key role, and in some member states, in the EU, but also in other countries, the educational paths for girls and women are still too narrow, and there's something that can be done in this area. Now, just on the labor market, also to talk about a few hurdles, even if you have the right skills, then that's not a guarantee that you get inside. So for instance, there are data from McKinsey that when you are an ICT graduate, if you're a woman, 38% chances you end up in ICT. If you're a man, 53% chances of ending up in an ICT job. So you see, the skills alone don't do it. Then there are basically issues of gender biases. There are issues of that play a role in recruitment. They can play a role in promotion. Then you come, once you are not getting promoted, you have an issue of too few women at the top. And that is almost like a vicious circle, because then they're again playing a role in promotion and in hiring. And therefore this circle has to become a virtuous circle instead of being a vicious circle. Since we are also talking about personal experiences, I'm an economist, not in energy itself, but I was for a while trying to become a director in an area dominated by male economists, 11% in senior management. I've applied for positions. There are 4 positions open, all occupied by men in the end, yeah? So the Commission has come a long way also as an employer, but I know how it feels like that you think you can do the job, but others think you should spend more time at home with your children, which is a comment I heard about my career at some point. Anyway, I made it, but it means you need persistence, and I agree you need also mentoring and support from certain people. So then, just to say, incentives. Why do women earn 15% less in the energy sector? So if we need them so badly, please ensure equal pay. And I think there, especially if we are now at a moment where there are labor shortages in this area, in renewables, then okay, this is time for employers to work on the salaries for women. And the last point was also mentioned already a bit, care burden. There also have interesting numbers, because women on average spend 31 hours per week in unpaid work, and men 18 hours per week. And that means it's much more difficult to, be successful and also full-time. So what do we do at the Commission? So as part of our equality strategy, on the one hand, and more broadly in addressing digital skills and green skills, if I may call them, we have a council recommendation to ask member states to close the gender gap in digital skills, among other things. We also ask them to step up policy efforts for the acquisition of skills needed for the green transition, and I'm sure it benefits both. We have specific initiatives such as the micro-credentials, which mean even if you have a short training spell, it should be recognized formally, and I think this will benefit women also, because sometimes they have less time for longer formal training. We have then also the Pact for Skills, which I think is very powerful because it brings together governments, education providers, social partners to identify areas where training is needed. For instance, there's the Renewables Energy Pact, which identified 3.5 million training needs in the coming years. We have also the Offshore Renewable Pact for Skills, and it has a concrete target for reskilling, an explicit commitment to attract youth and women into the sector. Then we have also established an equality platform for the energy sector to offer space for discussions. And in the area of the labor market, we have a whole array of legal initiatives. For instance, the new Gender Balance on Corporate Boards Directive, which is demanding and also requires some monitoring and reporting by bigger companies. We have the Gender Pay Directive, which allows for more transparency, and women can ask, what is the average of the 3 men there in terms of salary, so that there's some transparency and you can then have an argument. There's also the directive on combating violence against women, because indeed harassment is still an issue. We have the Work-Life Balance Directive, where you set minimum standards in terms of also recent European care strategy, but I can't go into detail. So I'm almost at the end. We also support gender equality sort of beyond EU borders. For instance, there's the UNDC support That there is not only public and private climate financing, but that these countries then devise gender responsive planning. And I think I would like to say last but not least, of course, public commitments and such as the Equal by 30 campaign are extremely important to push the issue of women forward. And let me just say, I'm not part of that delegation, but most of the delegation of the Commission who is here in Goa is from DG Energy, and also the Commissioner for Energy, Kadri. She is a woman, the Director General is a woman, and more than half of the directors in DG Energy are women. So I think in some areas we're making progress. Thanks.
It's always challenging to be the last speaker because practically everything is said. But first of all, thanks to the organizers to have me over here. And I'll take the liberty of sharing some of my personal experiences as well. Well, the time when we were graduating, that was the time that women were largely looking for softer options. So it was something like, why don't you go in biological sciences, or in a way, your parents will try to convince you, you go into teaching because that is something which will give you adequate time to be spent with the families. So it was never, in a way, it was never taught to you that you can do anything. And when I graduated, that's the time when very few women will go for engineering. But then now the time has changed, and if we look at in India, especially STEM, programs, as well as in terms of women graduating, doing their PhDs, the ratios are pretty high. But where do they disappear after that? Because they are toppers at the university level, the number of those getting PhDs is much larger, but then they disappear. And perhaps that's largely, as mentioned by some of other panelists, is that they also have the responsibility of bearing the families and bring up children and so on. Now, maternity leave is something, yes, it's your right, but then to the employer, many a times they feel if they have a girl applicant and a boy, they prefer to go for perhaps, if they both are equal in terms of their credentials, they feel at this age she'll get married, she'll at least have 2 children, and therefore, can I afford that kind of break? And they opt for the other option. Now, paternity leave is something which should definitely be given, and also the boys should be taught that they have equal responsibility of bringing up children. So, which is not the case now. I don't blame the society alone, and I'll say something is wrong in the DNA of women because they are more caring and they feel it is their responsibility. So that thing is something which we perhaps need to change. And I'll also take it this way, but that maybe they have more patience and they are multitasking. So they are better equipped as well. Now coming to the other part, and that is that perhaps the whole society has been very indifferent to the needs of women. We talk about the large contribution of women in agriculture, but have we ever thought what kind of equipment is available today? The tractors, can they really be run by the women? The answer is no. It's all male-centric development of agriculture equipment. So there again, we have to look into what can be done. And over here, I'll say it's not just in agriculture. Perhaps many a times I feel that the seat belts in cars that we drive are also more suitable to men folks than us. So that needs to be done. The other important part where we miss on is especially in the rural communities and in a way socially disadvantageous sector of the society, the education will play a very important role. And if the woman is not educated and economically she's not empowered, she hardly has any role to play in decision making. And with the result, even if the family income goes up, rather than investing on clean energy for cooking and so on, if there is more money, the men folks will decide that they need to buy a two-wheeler rather than a clean cook stove. So in all our schemes, somewhere we have to bring it, they should be women-centric, that even if they are using clean energy fuel or clean cook stoves, then they should be given carbon credits. So the way the carbon market is developing, there should be something for the women that we should encourage them to use cleaner fuel. There should be mass awareness in terms of what are the disadvantages of using the kind of fuel which we are doing today, what is the importance, bringing the entire ecosystem in place and ensuring that they have better health because indoor air pollution is reduced and ultimately they are financially also benefited.
Thank you so much. And so I know that we all wish we probably had like another hour. I have a long list of questions that I wanted to ask. I think just maybe selfishly, I might ask just one. So what we're trying to solve for in our own office, we recently, when I joined our own office, only 10% of our directors were women. And starting in a few weeks, we will have 60% of the leadership in our team be women. And so I'm really excited about the progress that we've made. But again, it's a directive that comes from the top. One of the things we're trying to solve for, and I want to get your views on this, is what do we do about promotions? It's easier to quantify the pay gap. It's easier to quantify the number of women in leadership roles. But how do you determine whether or not the way that we approach promotions, priority projects, right? How do we do that in a way that is fair and equitable? Does anybody want to take that?
I think it's a lot about intentionality and how it gets embedded in the policies and the structure of the organization. Because if you don't have clear objectives of where you want to go and what you want to incentivize, it'll never happen. So I think once there is this intentionality of also making sure that there is a structured way of looking at how you promote women. I'm not saying that you need to be giving them an unfair advantage. What often happens is, and I think panelists have also mentioned that, is when there's an equal, there's a male colleague and a woman colleague competing for the same position, you would often find that it's the male colleague who'll make it. But I think if it's a stated intention that you need to actually be mindful of this aspect while doing it, I think that really makes a difference.
Yes, I would also like to make a point. I mean, first, it was interesting for me that you mentioned priority projects, because what I've seen is that sometimes first men put men on priority projects, and later they say, oh, they did so great in this priority project, they now deserve a promotion. And I think there's, you have to be conscious about what is happening there. So that is one thing that I find really very important. The second thing is about promotions. I would distinguish it a bit between within your grade or whether you go to a higher position. If it's within your grade, then normally it should be, those who are most performance should get the promotion, but at equal performance, the woman should maybe get it first. Now, when it comes to higher positions, we have in the Commission, we have also set some sort of quotas, but not, for each position. It's more like over time, in a year, for instance, you have to sort of fulfill certain quotas, and they're increasing over time. Maybe they're now at 40%, or, they're going up. But so what we do there is, for instance, when a job is published and no woman applies for a head of unit post or for a director post, there might be an extension. If there were already women and men, applying, maybe not. But if you don't have women, you encourage more, you give more time, and so there's also some requirement to invite at least one woman into the interview, and so on and so on. So I think that a lot that can be done.
I just want to echo some of these thoughts. The key first point is to be intentional, absolutely intentional. 45% of my board is women. 50% of my executive team, and almost 50% of the science team in our company is women. You just have to gear your thinking and how you interview and how you look at things by asking the question, is the woman leaning forward on the project, right? You know, when you look for project leaders, the men will always step forward and the women will wonder, can I actually do that? They're always self-doubt. So you have to make sure you say, yes, you can do it, and you're going to do it. And that allows them to be able to excel. So you really do have to be intentional. With the board, it was very simple. I needed 2 people who were accounting finance leaders to come on my board and be on the audit committee. One I knew, she was a woman and an African American. Don't forget that disadvantages and equality are not just about women. And so you always have to look for an opportunity. So the first person, I knew who she would be. The second slot, I wanted it to be a woman, but I wasn't sure who. So I specifically asked everybody I could ask, make me a list of the top. Don't allow that. And if you don't allow that, it just happens. It's natural, because all you've had to do is just say, yep, you can do it. So go off and do it. Prove to me and everybody else that you can do it.
Can I make a quick comment? And that is that the women normally shy away from networking. So we have to give them confidence and also space and that's the duty of the family, perhaps, that they should have adequate time for networking as well.
Well, with that, I'm very sad to say that we're concluding this panel. I'm going to hand it back over to the MC. I just wanted to say just how inspired I am by all of your personal stories. And I want to let us walk off the stage with this one word that is so powerful, which is intention, right? And making sure that as leaders, as managers, that we are intentional in our actions and trying to promote women into closing the gender gap, closing the pay gap. So just thank you so much for your leadership and for demonstrating what we should all be striving for. Thank you.
Without further ado, we have the new head of the CEM Secretariat, Jean-Francois Gagné, coming up for some very quick remarks.
Thank you very much, Ainsley, and thanks very much to the Equality and Energy Transitions Initiative, first for organizing this event, but also for giving me the privilege and honor to be here today. There are a gazillion reasons why I'm extremely thrilled to be here, but maybe let me focus on maybe 3 or 4. And maybe let me do something that is usually typically non-Canadian, but let me be patriotic for a few minutes and recognize Canada's leadership, both in terms of the launching of the Equality and Energy Transitions Initiative, but also the Equal by 30 campaign, and having it carried it so far since then. I want to recognize the co-leadership in the launch of Sweden and Italy, and really thank Austria for stepping up to take it up. But I do want to recognize Canada's continued leadership in the initiative and abroad, notably during their G7 presidency when they got all G7 countries to sign on to it, and then working very closely with the UK and Germany during their own G7 presidency to take it even further. So that's a very great example of how an initiative that is focused on action can actually support high-level policy goals. And so I think this is, from a CEM Secretariat point of view, an amazing success story. But I also want to recognize the Canadian leadership during their hosting of CEM-10 in Vancouver for actually putting this question of socio-economic issues at the center of the energy transition debate. And this is the second reason why I'm very proud to be here, this time as the CEM head, because I think this is one area where the CEM is really unique in terms of defining socioeconomic issues, not only as what is right to do, but what is smart to do. there are huge challenges in moving the energy systems forward, and socioeconomic impacts are actually essential barriers to be taken down. There's a lot of work being done in terms of skills, talent, being able to make sure that we have the right workforce to be able to enable the transition. We often say that energy is the blood of the economy, but the people are the blood of the energy sector. And if we don't have enough qualified and talented people to be able to activate the energy transition, we will fail. So not only are we working these questions within the Empowering Peoples Initiative under the CEM, but this is where the work of the EETI becomes extremely important, because inclusivity is key to having that workforce. I will say I've been fortunate to work with many of today's speakers and panelists. And I can say that if we consider the talent, the drive, the innovation that these women have shown, and if we had not been able to rely on their talents to get us to where we are today, I think would be in an even more challenging position in terms of addressing the challenges today. So that's the third reason why I'm happy to be here. It's as an energy transitions enthusiast, I actually am happy that we are considering how can we make sure we don't put barriers to bringing in half of the talent pool that we need to rely on to advance the transition. And then finally, from a more personal note, I'm proud to be here as a man. I totally agree with what was said. In my view, gender equity is not a women's issue. It is everyone's issue. As I said, we don't do gender equality and inclusivity in general just because it's right. We do it because it's needed. It's the smart thing to do. And I feel very privileged to have been able to know these people, but I also get touched upon a few of the things that were said today and feel very proud in terms of the leadership that these people are taking over. So first, let me start by recognizing DDG Singh's the ARENA announcement of joining Equal by 30. And I want to answer the kind of question that was left in that announcement, which was, are we allowed to join if we're not a CEM member? A CEM is a we want to do community. It is not a we need to feel. So we are very happy to join all the partners, and of course ARENA is absolutely welcome, and I do want to recognize the leadership role from the DG in that respect. I also want to echo some of the points made by both Barbara, I think, and Ashta in terms of the role of discouragement that colleagues and men can actually thrive. And that's what I mean about being proud to be here as a man, is I hope that I'm not part of the problem, but that I can be part of the solution. And the last point I want to say is I'm also proud to be here as a dad, because being part of the solution sometimes only means believing in what it is. You don't even have to realize what you're doing. I'm the extreme proud father of a girl who's entered aerospace engineering in university. And my pride doesn't just come from the fact that she, is following in her dad's footsteps. That's actually something I probably would have discouraged her to do. But it's the fact that when she was discussing with her schoolmates, she was trying to get more people to join the STEM fields. And so I don't know what I did, but I must have done something that's not too bad. And so I guess I will basically end my speech by just giving a call to all the men out there. I think all we need to do is believe that this is the right thing to do, and then I think we can be definite allies. So I want to thank the panelists, EETI community, the whole CEM-MI community, and launch a call to action to everyone. If we believe in this, I think we can find the ways to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I will point out that we have been intentional in two ways here with this session. We've had some amazing panelists hearing from women's personal experiences, their recommendations on what has made a difference for them within their organizations. And we are also bringing allies to the stage. We are targeting, we need the 50% of the population to have these opportunities, but 50% of us won't get it done. We need 100% of the population on board, and so our allies play a really critical role. I'll use the opportunity to introduce Assistant Deputy Minister Franck Desrosiers from Strategic Policy and Innovation at the Department of Natural Resources in Canada. It's a great opportunity for you to learn more about the Equality and Energy Transitions Initiative, as well as the Equal by 30 campaign, and a new tool that we've developed that I hope you'll find is quite helpful. And Frank will fill us in on all the details.
Thank you, Ainsley. And yes, I'm doubly happy to be here because it's a great initiative and a very inspiring effort. And yes, having all of us kind of pitching in is important. So I'm not going to be speaking on behalf of the 4 billion males, but I'll certainly strive to give you a bit of a hint of what Canada has been doing, especially in the energy space. So maybe to kick it off, and while I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is, this issue of gender equality is a major Government of Canada commitment. You've probably seen Prime Minister Trudeau speak quite openly about this in the context of G7 meetings and other world gatherings. And we've also led a number of initiatives within the government. Gender parity is actually a norm now across our cabinet table, and not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of key portfolio. The Deputy Prime Minister is a female, the Defence Minister, along with the Foreign Affairs Minister, along with a number of senior cabinet members. We've also heard from Julie, her effort to drive executive cadre within the US DOE. So this is also something we've been paying attention to in the Government of Canada, where now over half of the executive across the public service are female. And same thing for senior executive, assistant deputy ministers and deputy ministers. So that's something also that we've been quite proud of. And there's also been a number of flagship initiatives announced by the government lately. One of the obstacles that we heard during the earlier panel was the issue of access to quality childcare available for female who wish to pursue a career as well as to raise a family. And that's something we heard loud and clear across the country as well. So the government committed to offer affordable childcare for all across the country. So that's a $30 billion commitment that we're in the process of implementing countrywide. Also, initiative in terms of foreign policy or international assistance envelope, making sure that Canada is able to protect such values around the world is also something that we've embedded. And I mentioned a few of those key flagship measures, but I would say probably more importantly, we've embedded gender-based analysis in all of our policies and programs. So to put it simply, if you want to bring about a new legislation, you must have that gender-based analysis. If you want to bring a budget item proposal, you also have to do such analysis. As any items going to the cabinet table also have to be viewed again that perspective. So that means that in effect in every federal department we have centers of excellence who advise program managers, policymakers to make sure that when they devise their respective initiative, they actually thought it through. Because what we witness over time is that's not that people on purpose go out of their way to make life difficult for any particular segment of society, but clearly there's some, I guess, norms or practices that just get carried away from the past. And actually, unless you pay attention and think it through, you risk replicating past behaviors and approaches in program design. So that's really that conversation that needs to take place across the government that really can lead to difference across thousands of data points and programs and initiatives. But at the end of it, we are confident that this is the better way forward. So that's a bit of a broad context setting. So maybe to drive in terms of the particular focus on energy, you've heard the statistics from so many of our guest colleagues from the United Kingdom, from C4All, from the US government and others. The numbers are pretty clear that there's still quite the gap in the energy space. So depending on your data source, we're somewhere stuck in the mid-20s, high 20s across most of our jurisdictions. So clearly this is something where we felt there was a need to do more. And that's what led us 5 years ago in 2018, along with Sweden, to launch the Equal by 30 campaign, which was to acknowledge that there was a gap, that there was something that we needed to address head-on, and to bring along other partners from Canada but around the world to tackle it. So we've launched this platform together with Sweden to invite governments, companies, and other organizations to join the effort and trying to inspire us all to make progress against this. And we've identified 7 broad categories where we're looking to make progress. Progress in pay, progress in terms of leadership, opportunities, and so forth. But basically kind of challenge any signatories to set their own targets, their own objective. What's meaningful for them in India, in Germany, in Africa, all around the world, to see how can we drive progress forward. And I'm glad to report now, 5 years after much effort from so many, We have now close to 200 signatories who've signed on to this. All G7 countries are part of it. You heard the European Commission and IRENA also looking to join shortly. We have subnational governments, provinces, states. We all call them somewhat differently, but they also are important actors in the scene. Private sector firms, Hitachi, NI, ENJAS, along with so many others, as well as NGOs, youth organizations, African Energy Chamber. We heard about Cooking Alliance, some of the issues and the risk around cooking, so the Clean Cooking Alliance has joined us. The Powerful Women Initiative that was also referenced by one of the guest speakers. So again, just to give you a bit of a sense of who those players are. And each of those laid out their own commitments. So we have 300 of those commitments out there that people are gunning to accomplish by the year 2030 and the years beyond. So just to give you a bit of a flavor of what those are, so looking at issues around mentorship initiatives, apprenticeship, targeted investments that are envisaged in their respective organizations, STEM-related efforts, focusing on youth as well. So it's really impressive to see the sheer a range of such efforts. But the Equal by 30 initiative is not just laying out a target and committing to it, but it's also making sure that we activate that dialogue, that conversation, just like we're doing today. So having opportunities to webinars, to conferences, to in-person events like we're doing today, to be able to share experiences, challenge each other, give each other tips and ideas as to how we can make it happen. And it's wonderfully uplifting to see this occurring. And again, giving each other's confidence and hope that we'll be able to get the job done. So as Ainsley is referenced, we today are not only celebrating those milestones and those key progress we've made, all of us together, but also launching a self-assessment tool. Because the goal there is not trying to embarrass anybody, quite the contrary. We want them to feel empowered and first having a sense of are they tracking against their commitments, so having a sense of assessment of progress, but also identifying whatever remaining gaps that they face. So this web tool is meant to be simple to use. It's a web-based system where people can go and click their way to see where they are at and what remains to be done in terms of going forward. And it's also a way for the collective to see how much progress are we making, all of us together. So really proud to be able to have made this happen, and allow me to give special credit to those two ladies, our MC today, Ainsley Emerson, who has been championing this within the Natural Resource Department, and Anatolas as well, who have been wonderful co-leaders of this initiative, along with many others. Thank you so much.
What you see here on the screen is just some of the information contained within the self-assessment tool. We did have a QR code there. We will be available during the networking session if anyone's looking for further information. And finally, I will invite our last speaker to join me on stage, Dr. Anita Gupta, who has a PhD in engineering, and we celebrate all the women here who have a STEM background. She is with the Department of Science and Technology with the Government of India, and will share her concluding remarks.
Very good morning, and thank you organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my closing remarks in this session on the gender equality in clean energy. So let me begin with some of the positive trends we in the Government of India or Department of Science and Technology can showcase. So first of all, let me begin within the department. When I started off and joined 2 decades back, we had a single woman as a heading the division. Now we have more than 50% women who are heading various divisions of the department. So that needs to be really celebrated. And as we heard the very inspiring talks and the lively panel discussion with the eminent leaders representing various countries and walks of life in the energy domain, it's really very inspiring to note the kind of personal stories they had, the kind of contribution they have made in their career progression. And I was really thrilled to listen to Jennifer, your story, how you have really made a mark by yourself. And your punchline, like, you have to believe in yourself and you can do anything if you want, provided you have the right intention in place. So that was really inspiring. Another aspect which I would like to touch upon, within the department, even we were the first one to see and factor in the leaky pipeline in the STEM area. We have close to 42% of women represented in the STEM area. But if we really think about the kind of women represented in the STEM careers, there's a leaky pipeline. So we were the first one to devise a program which is only focused on women, what kind of proactive policies needs to be put in place. So we have program Women in Science and Engineering, Kiran program, which is not only targeting young schoolgirls, but is also targeting unemployed and employed women both, if there is a gap in the career. And also we have coined a new program wherein we are actually enhancing the capabilities of institution. That's a gender advancement by transforming institution, acronyms as GATI, wherein the institutions are really, you can say, labeled according to, and they are given much more incentives and funding for career and advancement of women. So this program is also really a good program for institution building and having a gender balance. So this is a new program, and how to really enhance the participation of women in the field like engineering. When I joined my engineering program way back in '87, we were hardly 6 to 7% in engineering. Today we see their participation has really enhanced and gone up to close to 20%. So these are the visible positive trends we need to celebrate. Recently, India had launched a moon mission, Chandrayaan-3. And if you really talk about the contribution of women scientists and engineers in there, that's really creditable. So there are array of women scientists who are working in not so male-dominated areas and cutting-edge areas. These needs to be celebrated. And as I have led a program on incubation startups and tech-based entrepreneurship within the department, and I could see many women startups now making a mark in the areas, be it aerospace, be it nanotechnology, and of course healthcare is already dominated by women. So there are a lot to be celebrated as success. And India is the first, as a government, India is the first one to bring out a proactive policy where certain class of companies, they have to have at least one woman director for better corporate governance. So these are the some of the trends which India has really proactively taken. And we have, in terms of maternity leave, 6 months of maternity leave. And I don't see India where there are talks about the pay disparity as such. So India there's an equal pay. So these all are something which needs to be, we need, as an Indian, we need to be proud about. So let me just focus and dwell a bit upon the energy sector as well. As we all know, the clean energy sector continues to grow and evolve, and the competitiveness relies based on the ability to attract and retain a diverse talent pool, which can really bring fresh perspectives. Many countries have recognized the importance of harnessing all talent and closing the gender gap, noting that greater gender equality brings both economic and social benefits to all. However, as we have already listened to previous speakers, that energy sector happens to be the most gender imbalanced sector, and women make substantially less than half of the workforce across the energy sector and continue to be underrepresented in leadership positions. So closing the gender gap is not only a moral and social imperative, but makes good sense for businesses, as studies reveal that diverse organizations perform better. The barriers which women face, as we all discussed and we came to know through the panelists, they are somewhat similar what has been faced by other sectors of the economy. However, the challenges which are posed in the energy sector are somewhat more pressing as the sector is undergoing a lot of transformation. So the role of women assumes greater importance because this sector needs to be led by innovation and also inclusive solutions. So energy as a producer as a consumer. So this will have a different aspect to be covered. And as such, gender diversity and the broader participation of women in the energy sectors are needed for a successful clean energy transition, which globally we are aspiring for. So the clear need is for the governments and industry to act together in synergy and harmony and address these obstacles and overcome barriers to full participation and career advancement. So the countries and the governments need to really set up measurable targets and adopt evidence-based gender policies and programs to foster the change and achieve the energy justice which we are all aspiring for. And equally important is the commitment which has to be really come from all these stakeholders, be it government, industry, or the organizations which are involved in this sector. To achieve gender equality in the energy sector, we require 3 E's: equal opportunity, equal pay, and equal leadership. Some governments are really making a mark in the women leadership and participation in the energy transition, making it a key priority. We heard from the Canada, the kind of initiatives and the proactive policies which are being put in place. As we are targeting the advancement, because the punchline of this whole initiative is advancing clean energy together. So we definitely need to include women in all aspects of dialogues and actions. I would also like to point, to conclude, we need 3M to be put in place, as we heard. First is the mindset change, second is the mentorship, and third is the model. It's not business model, but new role models. So we need to really create new role models for women to really inspire the fellow women who will be in the energy domain. So with these words, I really would like to see that even I think in this platform, and as Julie has said, in our mission innovation, I could see a lot of women. It is, I think, more than 50% women who are active participants and they contribute. So we need to really cherish and celebrate all these successes. And I could see that women in going forward by 2030, which is the first tipping point, 2050, we will have a greater participation of women in all diverse fields, be it engineering, be it leadership position in government, in driving, and they will be a major driving force. So thanks to all women, thanks to all men who are actually driving this social change, which is so very required for making our world an equitable world. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. We have come to the end of our session. I'd very much like to thank the role models that we've had here on stage, our speakers, Lee, all of our panelists. Julie, thank you for chairing our panel discussion. Thank you to Frank, and JF has left us now. We really appreciate your participation, and we hope that you leave here. The session was called Igniting Change. We've heard some outrageous numbers where even now in 2023, we know that women deserve so much more and aren't meeting those targets that we're hoping for. So I hope that this ignites and inspires passion for you to remain dedicated to this area. I hope that you've identified ways that you can make personal change, ways that you can challenge system-wide problems, and that you'll carry that forward to your work. You'll share that information outside of these walls. We need as many partners as we can to be on board. So please bring that forward. Please keep that in mind through the rest of your participation here at CEM and MI and throughout your work. So thank you again for joining us, everyone, and please take the time during the tea and coffee session to connect with each other and continue sharing your stories. Thank you.
Energy for All and UNEP-led Cool Coalition to this official CEM-14 Mission Innovation 8 side event, which is focused on sustainable cooling for a just and equitable energy transition. I'm Lily Riahi, Global Coordinator of the Cool Coalition, and I'll be moderating this discussion today. Please do note the event is being live streamed. So today's topic is of critical importance for mitigation and adaptation. Heat waves, as you all know, are making headlines across the globe. June was the hottest June ever recorded. In this warming world, we need cooling to protect us against this heat stress, to enable productive work, and to reduce food loss and enable access to healthcare and vaccines. So we need to increase access to cooling, which is the discussion today. But we cannot expand access to cooling on a business as usual basis if we want to achieve our energy and our climate goals. Cooling is the top driver of electricity and peak demand. It's already straining our grids. By 2050, the energy requirement for space cooling is predicted to grow 300%. That's 6,200 terawatt hours. Imagine the strain on our grids. So we really need to go fast to accelerate a transition to sustainable cooling. And fortunately, there are a lot of solutions at our fingertips, which we will hear about today from our distinguished guests and panelists. First, we'll hear from Brian Dean from SE for All, who will present key findings from this year's Sustainable Energy for All Chilling Prospects report, which is launched this week. We will then hear from the COP28 UAE presidency on the Global Cooling Pledge and how they are raising ambition on cooperation for sustainable cooling towards COP28. This will be followed by a panel discussion with countries, philanthropy, and private sector who are implementing action on the ground. This will close with a question and answer session, so please keep your questions noted for then. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Brian Dean to take us through the key findings from Chilling Prospects. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Lily, and welcome everybody for this session. Chilling Prospects report is one where we've been looking at the data every year, and it's like, okay, is it changing? What's happening? And this year, I think we're at a different moment now, and a moment where we see this Chilling Prospects is really a call to action. We really are in uncharted territory, as Lily was saying. These heat waves keep coming. The story headlines keep changing every day, but look at these ones where, obviously food prices are going up because of lack of cold chains and these extreme heats. Of course, how do we keep talking about this? People keep dying, right? I mean, the heat is actually killing people, and humans are approaching the limits of survivability. I mean, these are the headlines that we're getting now. So this is a moment in time where understanding the risks that people face around the world is getting more important. On the left-hand side here, we have the high-risk populations. These are the urban poor and the rural poor that, number one, can't afford that sustainable home, that efficient home. They can't afford an air conditioner, maybe not even a ceiling fan. This is 1.12 billion people that are at high risk, and this population on the left-hand side, these are the ones where they need support through investment from the rest of us, from the rest of the world. We need to support these people at high risk. And of this 1.12 billion, about 770 million of those people are just in 9 critical countries. And so, not that we should address only those 9 critical countries, but we have 9 critical countries where significant progress is needed, where 3/4 of the 1.12 billion people are located at high risk. On the right-hand side is a slightly different story. This is the lower middle income. These are the people that are just starting to afford air conditioning, and all those scary numbers that we hear about going from 1 billion to 5 billion air conditioners. This is the population, this 2.9 billion. And again, 2.2 of that is in, again, 9 critical countries. So But what we see with the two trend lines between the high risk and the medium risk is that on the left-hand side, we see a slight decrease. And actually, there was an increase during the pandemic when wealth distribution was going in the wrong direction. But since the pandemic, we have now fewer people at high risk. But the medium risk continues to increase. This is an increasing wealth and an increasing population that needs protection from governments so that they don't have the opportunity to buy inefficient, high global warming potential technologies. This is the population that needs support to recognize that it's actually more cost effective to have higher efficient technologies, better homes, and everything else that is going to be better for the environment and for the people. So these are the trend lines that we're seeing. Now, where are our calls to action? And what we're seeing is that we have four calls to action from this report. So number one, it's closing the gap and channeling action where it's most urgent. So leading up to COP28, how do we catalyze new commitments towards pro-core cooling innovation? And of course, what you're seeing in this map is the countries with the darkest color are the ones with the highest percentage of their population at high risk. And Mozambique, as an example, is 83%. So that is a whole country that needs a lot of support. It's not just pockets of population. It's pretty much a whole country. The second call to action is closing the gap on addressing human and climate risk. And this is that lower middle income population that I was talking about, where 2.9 billion people are going to be purchasing air conditioners. Now, before they purchase that air conditioner, can we reduce their need for air conditioning? Can we use solutions that reduce the urban heat island effect? Can we have insulation, better windows, external shading, all of these features that we know will improve our thermal comfort and protect them and protect the climate at the same time before they purchase the least efficient and largest air conditioner possible. The next call to action is really about protecting those vulnerable urban dwellers. And what we're seeing, of course, is that the urban poor it's increasing in Africa. It's relatively stable and very large across Asia. And Latin America is relatively stable as well. But this is an increasing population base, and one where, I mentioned the urban heat island effect, where we can use nature-based solutions in making sure that we have cool cities. We want cities and partners to join on to the Nature for Cool Cities Challenge. And this data shows that the populations in cities are going to increase, are continuing to increase, have increased for years. We need to protect, in particular, the urban poor that may not have a solution of an air conditioner. They may have ability to go somewhere in the community for air conditioning. So are there community scale cooling solutions and nature-based solutions? And the fourth one is let's make sure that we have gender responsive solutions. So this is the first of the Chilling Prospects reports that disaggregated all of the data by gender. And of course, what we see is that there are more women than men at high risk. So the urban poor and the rural poor, there's 52, 54% women. So you could say not a huge difference, but the fact that there are differences, we need to understand, okay, what are the gender-specific needs? What are the needs in terms of comfort and safety in the rural community versus urban? What is the needs for food and nutrition? Where do we need refrigerators, as opposed to requiring daily activities focused on getting fresh food and not being able to store it? How do we improve health and care, so both the vaccine side and also the hospital healthcare facility side? And This is the first for us, where we went through and disaggregated by gender. But we hope that bringing this data forward will help us at the country level better understand where there may be opportunities with gender disaggregated data to have gender-responsive solutions. And you can find all this information on the SE for All website for chilling prospects. Also, the Sustainable Cooling Solutions tool. You can find the Beat the Heat Nature for Cool Cities Challenge on the Cool Coalition website, and our recent work on gender as well. So with that, hand it back over to Lily.
Thank you, Brian, for those chilling prospects. I'd like to invite Mr. Rama Al-Shamsi from the COP28 team, the lead of hard-to-abate sectors in the energy transition team.
Thank you. Great. I'd like to first off start by thanking UNEP and Lily, obviously, for hosting this session and for all the great work that we've been doing together throughout the year. I'm Rama Shamsi from the COP28 UAE team, and as Lily mentioned, I look at heavy emitting sectors, one of which is cooling. Right, so we've been working throughout the year with UNEP on developing the Global Cooling Pledge, which we'll take you through now. So first off, I want to give maybe a little bit of a background on UNEP, the UNEP-led Cool Coalition, which is a joint effort of a wide-ranging variety of partners, which includes country governments, civil society, private sector, international organizations, and subnational governments as well. And it's through this very strong partnership model that we decided to really lean into this in developing the Global Cooling Pledge, which we will be announcing at COP28, hopefully. So the Cool Coalition was put forward by the UN Secretary General at the UN Climate Action Summit, which looks to, number one, reduce the need for mechanical cooling, moving to more efficient forms of cooling, while also making sure that we're increasing access as well. Just as we heard from Brian's presentation, the risk that the world is facing in terms of heat-related injuries or death is only going to increase moving forward. So this, again, is some of the working groups that the Cool Coalition runs. Obviously, there's the advisory group. They look at cold chain as well. So when we're talking about how cooling relates to health and the food sectors, that is quite important. There's also, I think, one point that I'm not going to go through all of this, obviously, but the National Cooling Action Plans is a methodology that actually came out of India, which the Cool Coalition has now adopted and is helping other countries in developing their own national cooling action plans. It's a holistic way to be able to address the need for cooling within member states. So in January this year, on the sidelines of Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, we announced that we're going to be working on the Global Cooling Pledge alongside UNEP. And on this slide, we just have a few quotes from some of our advocates and some of our champions. So obviously, we have the COP President Delegate, we have the UNEP Executive Director, and we have Abhay Bakre from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Government of India, and then we have Dan Jorgensen from Denmark as well. So it is a very wide-ranging grouping of countries, and we'd also love to accept any more expressions of interest from other nations that would like to work with us on this. So just recently, we have announced our agenda, our thematic days for COP28, and one of our days is the Just Energy Transition Day, under which we will have cooling. While cooling is a very wide-ranging subject, we believe that placing it under the Just Energy Transition Day gives it the importance and the attention that deserves and needs. So throughout the year, as mentioned, we began this work around January. The background work actually began way before that, as I've heard from numerous colleagues who have been involved in this. We have been conducting several workshops to develop and look at what needs to be in this pledge, right? So what is additional that we can do as an international community, as a global community, as well as non-state actors to really push forward the work that is needed for cooling. So as you can see, there have been several touch points, whether in person or online, that have led up to where we are today here in Goa. So I'm not going to go through all of this because there is quite a few points that we do have in the Global Cooling Pledge, but we placed some examples here just to give you all a little bit of an understanding of what we are trying to do here and why this is really important, right? There currently is no international initiative or a pledge or something that really gets nations together to look at cooling in a holistic way, and this is what we are trying to do. So just to give you some examples here, we start off the pledge talking about access to efficient cooling. And this again goes back to SE for All's presentation, which talks about really heat stress is becoming much, much more of an issue. Coming in from the UAE, I'm sure a lot of you find Goa hot. This is actually beautiful weather to me right now. And while we do have quite advanced air conditioning systems, I live in a building that has district cooling, the systems are very strained, right? We're reaching 50 degrees Celsius daily right now, which usually we'd get it maybe once or twice a summer. We're getting it daily now. So even in a rich country like the UAE, in a country that has had AC pretty much since we started developing, the strain is very obvious. It shows. Even people not in the sector are talking about how the system is suffering. Then we also talk about increasing the efficiency of air conditioning. We talk about building codes and how they could also lean into it. For example, if you're in a place that has south-facing windows, you obviously will need additional cooling, and the thermal efficiency of that building will not be what we need in order to be able to address it. And then again, as mentioned previously, we have a point here about national cooling action plans, which we really would encourage as many countries as possible to start looking at and developing. We talk about the power of public procurement to give a demand signal, right? So similar to what we see in things like heavy industry, in which we are asking governments to at least start giving those demand signals to encourage the market to start moving in the direction of whether it's low global warming potential coolants, whether it's more efficient appliances, really believe in the power of public procurement. And then there's a few more points here, but one that I also want to point out is nature-based solutions, right? So we've seen studies and examples on how, bodies of water scattered throughout cities can help bring down the urban heat sink effect. We've seen examples of how more green spaces can help do that as well. So we want to encourage that aspect as well, so we don't lean too heavily on the mechanical sides of the solution or the technology sides of the solution. We need to look back at how people have been cooling themselves for thousands of years, right? A little bit of that has been lost due to the increased technologicalization of a lot of these problems. So these are essentially the commitments that we would have countries sign onto as the mandatory part of the pledge, if you want to sign onto it. In addition to that, again, this is why we call it a menu of options, as you can see above. In addition to that, we also have optional commitments that nations can make. This is obviously, we've designed it this way to take into account different national circumstances, to take into account the different levels of resources available. Obviously, if a country like the UAE and the GCC wants to look at district cooling, it makes sense. But then if you move to a country, say like Norway, maybe it doesn't make as much sense to talk about district cooling, right? Maybe the numbers won't pencil out. So for the additional commitments, again, there's a lot more in the pledge that we're going to share with everyone here if you'd wish to have it and take a look and give us feedback. But these points here, we talk about increasing resources to transition the cooling market, right, for low global warming potential solutions, district cooling, passive cooling, and other technologies as appropriate. And then these two last points here were based again on our consultations in which we've received interest from subnational governments, so that would be cities or states that want to participate and want to be a part of this pledge, but obviously it's been designed for member states. So what we've done is also include points that would allow subnational governments to make their own commitments and to be a part of this effort as well. So when we talk about here, for example, heat action plans, this is something that the Asher Roth Foundation really is pushing. We have the chief heat officers of the UN. So this is, again, another aspect of cooling's one side of the coin, but heat is obviously the dangerous side of that same coin. And then the last point here as well is allowing some space for non-government organizations and private sector to be able to be a part of this and to help the efforts in terms of global cooling. So with all of that in mind, again, we'd love everyone here to take a look at the pledge in its entirety. You can follow the QR code here to be able to look at the latest version. I believe Lily mentioned today we're at version 20. So we're hoping to get to 2021. Don't kill me for saying that. But again, we'd love to make sure that we get as much feedback as possible in this. So our plan moving forward will be to take this on to the regional climate weeks. I'm sure all of you are aware of the scheduling for those. It's all part of our ecosystem. Africa Climate Summit Week is looking like it's going to be a very big one. Obviously Middle East, North Africa Climate Week, Latin America, and then Asian Pacific. And the landing zone, obviously, at the end of all of this is going to be at COP28, in which we hope to have secured the pledge, finalized the wording in it, and then secured as many countries and subnational governments, private sector to sign on to it in order to support this work. And with that, I'd like to thank you all, and we have all of our contact information on here. I hope you all had the chance to get the QR code. If not, it's still up here, and I'll hand it back to Lily now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rama, for the inspiration and for the leadership on the topic of sustainable cooling towards COP28. I think it's a big inspiration for all the stakeholders in this room and all the stakeholders around the world working on this subject. So thank you again for your leadership. I'd like to now invite the panelists up to the stage, starting with Mr. Arijit Singh Gupta, Director from Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India. Yves Saint Laurent, Yves Saint Laurent. Sorry, where is my mind today? Yves Laurent Sapoval, sorry. Yves Laurent Sapoval, Senior Advisor, Directorate for Housing, Urban Development and Landscapes from France. Viete Langset, Counselor, Climate and Environment, Royal Norwegian Embassy in New Delhi. Samia Malhotra, Program Officer from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. Sneha Sasher from Clean Cooling Collaborative. And Mr. Ravindra Dolaire, President of EcoZen Solutions. Okay. Well, thank you for all joining us here today. I think we've heard quite a lot of background from Brian in terms of the fact that we have quite a task upon us in terms of helping those 1.12 billion people who are at high risk to actually have access to sustainable cooling, and to doing so without further heating up our planet or impacting our energy transition. Many pioneer countries, such as those with us today, have demonstrated that it is achievable to increase access to sustainable cooling and also harness the benefits that cooling can provide. So if I can start with the countries on the panel today, could you tell us a little bit about the actions that your country is taking to improve access and accelerate the transition to sustainable cooling for a just and equitable transition? So maybe I can start with you, Arijit.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. So, of course, I think this is the third time we are meeting on this topic in this very year. The first time, of course, we had a very intense discussion during our pre-clean energy ministerial in Rio. Then we again had a side event in the sidelines of our G20, that is in the second energy transition working group at Ahmedabad, and we are now here. And of course, we are thankful to UAE for taking the lead and announcing this as a cool COP, so where again some major announcements are expected. Now, as far as sustainable cooling is concerned, it is a topic which is very important for a country like India as well, because of the tropical nature of the country, and as many of you may be aware that this year we have experienced the highest peak load during our summers. So it touched around 240 gigawatt. So that was the kind of load that we are seeing every increase in load every year, year after year. The cooling, as we have discussed earlier also, and we all agree that it's no more a luxury, it's more of become a necessity, because unless and until we have a good cooling in place, it will be difficult for countries, especially in the Middle East and of course the tropical countries, to go for work properly and also for a healthy lifestyle. Now, coming to the sustainable cooling topic, of course, India has come up in 2019 with the India Cooling Action Plan, where we have laid out a comprehensive roadmap as to what are the areas we should touch in the next 20 years. It provides a very good horizon to all of this. And of course, if we look at the kind of activities that has been taken up by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and also by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, so we have been able to come up with a very successful standards and labeling program for our air conditioners, which takes care of the active cooling load and reduces the active cooling load. Similarly, we have also had the building codes in place, which kind of aim to reduce the passive cooling load of the buildings. We have also recently started working on district cooling and cold chain. So these are the steps which the government has taken with an aim to optimize the cooling load and achieve the roadmap that has been laid out as per the India Cooling Action Plan. So Lily, I will pause here. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Arijit. I think it's inspiring to hear about the comprehensive actions that India and the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has taken to tackle the cooling challenge in your country. And it's great to see that you're also sharing this experience with other countries who are facing extreme heat and trying to accelerate the transition to sustainable cooling. Maybe I can turn to you, Yves Laurent, for how France has been taking action on sustainable cooling.
Yeah, France is lucky, apparently. We had a heat wave in 2003, and we had a 60% increase of mortality in the August month, reaching 15,000 deaths. So this was quite awakening for us, not only really awakening. The government, some of the government's ministers had to resign, and it was an important moment. So as what we're doing, first, in terms of regulation, we introduced in building codes summer comfort. So we have now regulation for new buildings that is aiming at regulating the summer comfort. So I think it's an important point because I just want to come back a little bit on that, on the question of envelope and the buildings. It's true what Rama said, that people have been cooling for 1,000 years. the buildings, the cooling in buildings is not a new question. Some of you might know about the underground palaces in the desert of Tunisia, magnificent Roman villas in underground. Lots of solutions have been developed for natural ventilation, for design, and these solutions are available, cheap, and definitely we could work on exchanging on that and having more adaptation solutions to pass through countries as the climate is. I mean, we might have a Tunisian climate in some years in France, so we might use Tunisian solutions. This is why we also think that international cooperation is very important at this regard, so thank you for this roundtable, thank you for your initiatives. We are working together in the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction at this regard also, when you see what is the growing demand in the southern countries. We definitely need to enhance international cooperation at this regard. So we are doing this through Global ABC, Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, with UNEP. We called for a buildings breakthrough, and we will launch a buildings breakthrough at COP28, and definitely this question of refreshing envelope and cooling will be taken into account. And we are planning a global forum on climate and buildings in March 2024 in Paris to discuss all those points, and we'd be happy to invite all stakeholders and countries representatives to come. It's not exactly the question you asked, but it is what we think should be done. As for more technical questions on regulation and what we're doing, we're open to discuss it. Last but not least, we are also working on use and sufficiency. We are here in a very cool place, wearing very cool suits and ties. And it's definitely something that should be addressed. In France, we are working on a sufficiency plan that will aim also, of course, the question of refreshment. But we think that a world where the growing demand is in the southern countries, the growing demand of cooling is in the southern countries. We cannot continue with the chic air conditioning, with the chic glazing windows, and that need every time more and more air conditioning in cars, buildings. So we definitely need also to work on these sufficiency questions. That's an opening for question.
I think you said you didn't answer my question, but I think you actually did answer it very well, which is what do we need to do, basically, and what your country is doing. So I want to thank you, first of all, for highlighting what I think Brian referred to as pro-poor solutions. And I think the work that you're undertaking both in France and also through international collaboration to promote efforts on passive strategies in buildings is a very important point, and something that we all would like to raise ambition on. As Rama said, this is also a point in the Global Cooling Pledge, and something that we think is very, very important in the Cool Coalition as a first point of reducing demand for mechanical cooling. So thank you for that. I also very much noted the conference in March, and we're working very closely with the Global Alliance on Buildings and Construction to create synergies between cooling and buildings. So we very much look forward to participating to that. And then on your question of sufficiency. I think this is also a critical point. I mean, it's thermal comfort. I have to say, every time I go to an airport in Asia, I mean, I'm living in Bangkok right now, every time I go to an airport in Asia, I am freezing. And most conferences I go to as well, I am freezing. And so I think the question of what do we consider comfortable and what is the temperatures we set, and this, as you mentioned also, perhaps the suits we wear is something that we need to think about, the behavioral change, and that also is quite fitting with the LIFE initiative of President Modi. So very grateful for your points. And now if I could turn to you, I think, Beta, I think I'm really happy to have you here because I think many people think Norway would have nothing to do with cooling, right? I'm sure that's what most people think, so I'm quite glad to have you on the panel and hear your perspectives. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And many thanks for inviting Norway to this event, even if it's not cooling, that is the most important thing we do in Norway, as also mentioned earlier today. But we also see an increase in temperature also in Norway. The heat waves are also reaching Norway, not in that, of course, same as in Italy, Spain and France, but still we have also these smaller heat waves. But Norway has for a long time supported work to ensure sustainable cooling also internationally. And we are also part of the Cool Coalition. Just want to say few words about how Norway are working with, to try to make cooling more environmentally friendly. We have established and implemented a system for licensing the import and export of both new, used, recycled and reclaimed controlled substances. And in 2003, Norway introduced a tax on import and production of HFCs. And in 2004, this tax was supplemented with a refund scheme, which prescribes a similar refund to gas that is destroyed. This tax was initially €19, but now it's €80 per global warming potential ton. So this tax and the reimbursement scheme, they have resulted in better maintenance and improved routines for discarding old equipment. It also provides a strong incentive for choosing HFCs with the lowest GWP possible and has resulted in the increased use of natural refrigerants and alternative processes in new installations. So it has worked for many years. And also internationally, Norway has for many years been at the forefront of research of natural refrigerants, and we actively promote our expertise and implementation of such technologies internationally. We have a project, Norwegian-Indian project, called Indie Plus, and I think also there's a representative from that project here. You can raise your hand so people can ask you questions after this session. I'm afraid to say wrong things about the Indie Plus. But this is a successful ongoing project funded by the Norwegian MFA and also coordinated by the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU, in Norway. And this project aims to demonstrate eco-friendly natural refrigerants. They will help India to achieve the goals of ratifying the Kigali Amendment and the Paris Agreement. They have demo sites around in India to also do training and education for.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, taxing the imports on the HFCs, that's really, that's an excellent example. So thank you for sharing that with us and also reminding us of the importance of, in the cooling topic, here in the energy crowd, we're thinking a lot on energy, but the HFC phase down under the Kigali Amendment is very important in terms of reducing global warming and particularly coupling that HFC phase down with energy efficiency is what will get us a doubling of that impact and almost 1 degree avoided of global warming. So I think such measures to really promote low GWP alternatives are really important, and thank you for sharing that. Okay, so as well as governments, of course, we have private sector philanthropies and finance that plays a key role in the transition to sustainable cooling. So maybe I can turn to Soumya from CIF and Sneha from the Clean Cooling Collaborative to tell us a little bit about how international climate finance and philanthropy is active in this space.
Yeah, thanks, Lily, for this, and thank you for the really good presentation on what cooling really looks like in the present day, because I think the numbers keep changing on how much impact and what the heat risk to the population is, and it's just increasing. And it's heartening to see these new numbers and to really talk about them at a forum like this to really get people aware about the need to work on this cooling side. At CIF, being one of the largest global philanthropies working on children, our idea is really that children and the future generation shouldn't really be the collateral damage to the changing world, to the global crises, and climate crisis being one of the major ones. And they shouldn't really be collateral damage to all the crises that are happening. And in India, with CIF, we work on child health and nutrition, work and school access to girls and young women. But around all this, we also want to work in making sure that the environment is free, livable, safe, and healthy. And this will come when we can really start working on this climate side, and hence we work with the governments, we support the governments, and in partnership and collaboration with the government to support their climate development agenda and their climate development ideas. And cooling really finds a really important part in it, especially in India, considering it's a tropical country, and we're really seeing this increasing heat stress. And we had the hottest February, I think, in last 120 years this year. And Lily also spoke about how July at the global level, it peaked the amount of heat, and this is happening year by year. So our idea in India is to work with the government to ensure that we can really work in line with what they are working on for from the cooling perspective. At the global level, I'm really glad you spoke about HFCs, because that's what we were looking at in CIF when we were looking at the global level when we started working on cooling back in 2009. It was really to look at how we can phase down HFC, helping the Kigali Amendment to come to force, helping ratification of it throughout the globe. And this also led us to understand that the amount of philanthropy going to cooling is really limited. Leave alone to cooling, but even to climate, the amount of philanthropy going is just 2% globally. So there is a need to increase the amount of finance to climate, and especially to cooling now. Cooling really doesn't find a place in a lot of financial conversations, even at the global level. We're looking at a global transition of the global financial architecture, where we're talking to try to get climate integrated into the development agenda. But a lot of times, cooling will find a small part in that. How do we really pick up pace on getting this at the center is the whole idea, and that's something we really need to start pushing for. One thing that, as a philanthropy, we realized we have to galvanize more philanthropic efforts to this HFC phase down, to energy efficient cooling ideas, and that's where we helped set up KCEP, now CCC, and I'm going to let Sneha talk about how CCC is doing that. But that's what we did at the global level. We also realized at the local level, at national level, all the ideas being developed at the global level will not work in the regions. It has to be developed very context specific to the different regions. What will work in France or in Norway won't work in India, because India is a more tropical country. The access to electricity and energy is more changing, and the cooling demand is rising. So we'll have to make sure that we reach this cooling, increasing cooling demand in a sustainable way, and develop ideas around the regional efforts. And I think that's where finance can also come in. Working at the local level, in line with what the government's already announced, the ICAP is a very strong policy and a very strong guideline document on how cooling can be looked at in India. How we can further work with that to ensure that finance is directed towards the priorities set out in ICAP, and further downplay to the subnational level where the action will really take place. So I think when we talk about finance specifically, it's about recognizing what the priorities of the government are, because that really de-risks for private investment, for multilaterals, for even philanthropies. When we follow what the government is doing, we know they recognize the priorities for that region, and we work and we support that and work in line with that to ensure that finance flows to the right areas. Stop here. Thanks.
Thank you. I will let Sneha come in before I give any further feedback. But I mean, what I want to say is thank you so much for bringing together the HFC and energy efficiency agenda and supporting that, because as we see on this panel today, even the governments we have are from Ministry of Power and then Ministry of Environment and Climate. So bringing those sort of that whole of government approach to the cooling transition is what I believe both CIF and Clean Cooling Collaborative have been really leading on, and we just thanks for that. So over to you, Sneha.
Thanks, Lily, for facilitating this forum. Before I get to your question about the role of philanthropy, I'll share a small anecdote, if I may. Yesterday, I was at a roundtable, and we were talking about accelerating global action towards climate-friendly cooling, towards sustainable cooling. And in the roundtable, Professor Vishal Garg, I don't know if he's here in the room, he said, we should ditch our jackets when we come to events like these. And that'll force the facilities to make a shift. And so I said to him, all right, I'm in, and I'm shivering today. So apologies if I involuntarily shivered through my answer. But very valid point, I fully agree with him, and the points that also my other panelists made, Lily, you as well, talked about cooling sufficiency. So now I'll get to my answer about the role of philanthropy. Adding to what Soumya has already shared, just maybe pulling 30,000 feet up, I see two key roles for philanthropy in this ecosystem. One is philanthropy as a catalyst. So I think that's a very important role or position that philanthropies can bring in, and maybe I'll use examples to highlight what I'm saying. So, for example, the Global Cooling Prize was highly successful in demonstrating to us that we can indeed cool our built environment with 5 times lower climate impact. Beyond that, though, while the technology was demonstrated, there was not a clear path forward from that point. And I think that's where philanthropy stepped in to pick that up and mobilize that effort again. So at ClimateWorks, our cooling program basically convened with RMI and some other core partners. We are starting to work together to at least set the foundations for bringing that technology to the market. So I think just that initial catalyzation and setting the ball rolling is an important role for philanthropies. And now, subsequently, governments have an important role to play and come in with R&D support and support to the manufacturing ecosystem. The financing entities have a role to play as well. But I think that starting push, philanthropies can come in there. And then the second important role I see for philanthropies is philanthropy as an integrator. And what I mean by that is bringing together dispersed initiatives and trying to leverage synergies and coordinated action so that the whole is a lot greater than the sum of parts. And I think, and I've been on the other side as an implementer as well, and I can relate to this, that sometimes we are doing projects without being aware of, what another entity may be doing, or so sitting where I sit today in a philanthropy role, I'm able to sort of have a higher view and really observe where the synergies might be and where it might be of benefit to bring efforts together and entities together. So I think that's another important role for philanthropies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stick with accelerator and integrator. Thank you so much for that and for highlighting the role of philanthropy as an early mover in the sector and creating transformation. Speaking about implementers, if I may turn to you, Ravindra, what is your view from the private sector in terms of what enabling environment is needed to spur action and investment in sustainable cooling?
Sure, thank you. I would like to initiate this discussion with some interesting data points shared by Brian today in presentation, and 2 lines that clicked my attention there. In one of his slides, he mentioned that 77 countries which are analyzed. So 1.12 billion people are at very high risk. And there were two important data points in the same slide, that there is no access to electricity and there is no access to refrigeration for food, agriculture, produce, and vaccination. So when I was reading those lines, I was thinking about how a private sector can develop affordable, reliable, and sustainable cooling solutions to address some of this challenge. And everybody here understands that cooling saves lives, it ensures food security. But are we really creating such kind of innovative solutions, and is there a right framework available to develop these solutions? So with Ecogen's experience in India, Africa, as well as in Southeast Asia, and having developed agri-cooling solutions and understood a lot of challenges on the field, probably I would like to put forward a voice from private sector, what kind of support is required here and what initiatives can be taken to enable private sector and get involved into sustainable cooling initiatives. I would focus on three areas where definitely there is a need for a support and a thought should go into that direction. One is technology, second is finance, and third aspect is, I will say, on demand side. So currently there are talks, even in this forum and many forums, that solutions are available, or there are solutions many private sector companies are working on. However, do we have really right infrastructure in terms of investments into research and development? A lot of thought has to go into that direction, because there is absolutely a need of innovation in this sector. Many private sector companies are working into that direction, but there is a support required to make investment into research and development activities. And government and many organizations can take a lead and decision into that direction, like to support innovative project, probably bringing collaboration between the private companies and the research institute, and how can they come together to develop this type of innovative solutions. So this will definitely enable involvement of private sector. However, if it leads to better, let's say, financial incentives or even tax benefit, that will definitely enable private sector to look into research and development activities very actively and get involved into a mission of development of sustainable cooling solutions. But to do that, I feel another aspect which is very much required is right, clear policy framework from government institutions. Today, I mean, in India as well as in Africa, our experience says that the policy framework needs to be still redefined, and it has to have some clear objectives into the policies. For example, timeline to reduce emissions, timeline to achieve sustainable goals, and at the same time, probably a timeline to implement these solutions into the country to achieve sustainable development goals. So those clear objectives has to be defined, and then they should be connected with these financial incentive to the private sector. So I feel a combination of policies and combination of research and development activities has to be thought of at government level, different organizations, and a better collaborative approach can be developed in that direction. A third area, I would like to put a more focus on access to finance. The finance is available, but the affordable financing can play a very important role here to enable private sector. To give a very simple example, in India, in agri-cooling, 2 years back, government launched a very interesting scheme here. They call it as Agri Infrastructure Financing Scheme, AIF, where government is offering loan interest incentive to many supply chain players to adopt and develop infrastructure into the country. So low interest financing options, probably grants, green funds. So those type of financing, if available to the private sector, this will definitely boost the overall morale of the sector and they will also come forward and they will start contributing more towards development of innovations and more contribution towards sustainable goals. One more point I would like to put it towards the end is on demand. I'm not sure I would like to put this question here in the conference and this meeting as well. Probably we can think about it. Everybody is talking about sustainable solutions, sustainable cooling solutions, but how many of us really use or adopt these in our day-to-day life? So it is very important for everyone sitting here to create kind of public awareness through campaigns or to different modes to use sustainable solutions and what is the use of these sustainable solutions considering environmental impact. So those public awareness campaign has to be created in a collaborative approach and all stakeholders should come together to create that kind of awareness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for highlighting the ecosystem in which we can enable action from innovative private sector companies like yours. I just want to give a moment to everybody before turning to the final question to the panel, which will be for a 1-minute intervention, to just give a moment to anybody who would like to ask questions. So let's see if we have hands up. Oh, good. I'm glad we have a hand up. Do you have a microphone? Please do introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jiten Desai. With Brian's chilling prospect slide yesterday, I was part of that round table as well, and thank you, Rama, for that cool coalition pledge session. It reiterates why it's important. Now, quickly on the questions to the panel, I think there's a need, or I want to put on some comments to these documents that are being generated, that human thermal comfort and refrigeration or supply chain cooling should be segregated, and there should be a dollar amount associated to it. That would maybe help granularize, give you more granular clarity. I don't know whether this is open for inputs or whether it's going to be part of the next report. And in terms of passive cooling technology, there is a need to identify and go back in time and look at those windows, nature-based solutions, and bring up with concrete, implementable designs for architects to incorporate into their designs. And on the gender versus gender disparity on cooling, I would maybe even suggest put an age where small kids and old people are more comfortable with higher temperatures, whereas that would maybe make it useful as well. And on the climate appropriate solutions, I think there's a need to divide it on hot and dry climates, humid climates, composite climates, and like some of the Scandinavian countries where it's cool as well. And some of the, I don't know, I'm just going back to startups where failing fast is also a key criteria, but district cooling solutions, low delta T problems need to be identified, thrashed out, so that decentralized, centralized cooling systems are more appropriate. And on the ICAP, just one comment, it was launched in 2019. Are there short, medium, and long-term plans that are being tracked and progress that is available for public to consume? These are, I think, some of the points that I wanted to make. I hope it makes sense.
No, thank you so much. I just, thank you. I'm sure that's noted by Brian, who's working on chilling prospects and the gender disaggregated data. I just want to ask if there's any questions and really would like to take the opportunity to ask questions of our distinguished panelists.
I think,
did you want to?
Yeah, just.
You want to?
For the last question that he had regarding ICAP, the public,
Sorry, okay, yeah, go ahead. I didn't actually hear that that was a question. I thought it was a comment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, mostly it was comment, but I think...
there was a question on monitoring, yeah.
Yes.
Over to you, sorry.
Yes, so regarding the India Cooling Action Plan, yes, so as you may have seen, there are short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals specified. And there are committees working on each of those 6 thematic areas. And it is led by the Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Forest. But of course, the deliberations are not there in the public domain. But yes, your point is well noted. We'll try to pass on the message and we'll see that how much of the deliberations which we are anyway doing as part of the 6 thematic working groups for each of these areas can be made available in the public domain. Thank you.
My apologies for not knowing that was a question. Sorry. Thanks, Arijit, for your help. I saw a hand up here. Yes, please, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the amazing presentations. I have a short question.
May I ask you to introduce yourself?
My name is Luciano Caratori. I'm with the Climate Champions team. I have a question regarding the scope of the policies of the country examples and from the directory examples regarding the interplay between electricity pending. Any inputs on that would be valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll hand first to Arijit, who's from the Ministry of Power, to give his views.
Yeah, so you were asking more on the COP28, how is going to... can you please repeat your question? Yeah.
I think it was more, if I understood, about the interplay between like electricity distribution and cooling demand and what policies there are to address the demand on the grid.
I mean, the overlap between the cooling policy and the electricity distribution policy, if that's part of the scope of the examples and the policies you are going forward with. Thank you.
Yes, definitely yes. So if you may remember, I mentioned that the peak demand in India this summer was 240 gigawatt, which was the highest during the recent few years. And so again, and much of this peak load was due to the cooling load that has come, that is there. So if we look at that problem, and again, when we talk about climate policies, the climate commitments that we are making, of course, both are interrelated. So if we can tackle one, like if we can try and optimize the cooling demand, which we are anyway trying to do, we feel that we'll be able to, it will in a great way enable us to achieve our climate goals as well. So that's, of course, these are all interrelated. I mean, whatever climate policies we announce or whatever commitments we are making, those are somehow also related to the electricity distribution sector. And again, cooling will play a key role to it.
Are there any other panelists who'd like to respond to that? Oh, okay. Yeah, Sneha? Oh, go ahead, Laurent, and then also Sneha.
No, just, I'm not a specialist on energy, so I'm not going to answer properly the question. I think we have a shift of energy demand peak from winter to summer. This is, of course, a question of production. Of course, if you rely on sustainable solar energy, for example, you would have less trouble in getting energy, in answering to energy demand. But I just want to come back to the fact that as much as possible, we have to lower the demand of energy for cooling, and this comes with other solutions than only energy efficiency of appliances or getting more and more energy to feed the energy demand. So this would come back to my previous speech. I think well, I know if, what's the problem? Do we have a moment for a conclusion afterwards, or is it the, yeah, okay. No, it's okay. I just wanted to point this out, that the question of having a regulation on summer comfort is a way to answer to the question of the energy demand.
I just want to add, like, on what he's saying, because there was a study, for example, from the EPA. It's an older study in 2008 that shows like a street that's lined with trees versus a street that is not lined with trees. The residential peak power demand for cooling is reduced by, I don't know, I think it was like 30% or something. So there was a really big reduction of peak power demand for cooling through nature-based solutions, just to build on your point that it's not always about mechanical interventions, although on the mechanical side, there's also like demand-side response measures and policies. But I'm going to hand over to Sneha.
Yeah, just a real quick point. Adding to what Arijit already said, I think to your question, I also want to point out the India Cooling Action Plan, where even though it's talking about cooling and bringing in efficient appliances, but the end goal really is terawatt-hour reduction and annual reduction. Also, the India's residential building codes, the Eco-Niwas Samhita, where also, again, while it may not be explicitly stated, but somewhere in there, the thinking is that this can bring down the building residential cooling demand by about 20%. So that tie-in, certainly thinking about the energy consumption side of it, is certainly embedded in the thinking in those policies.
And I hope that your question has been answered, but there's many policies, I think, also that the panel's spoken about, and also there is this whole demand response policies that are really important also with the appliances and buildings, and also thermal storage incentives if you're using, for example, district cooling to shift peak power through thermal storage coupled with district cooling, or other kind of incentives that are used to shift peak power. So I think those are also some policies. And in the UN Global Cooling Stocktake report, where the results are not yet published, but will be coming this year, we find that at least 40 countries have integrated cooling into their electricity capacity planning. So that is also a very direct relationship. Okay, so more questions? I see that. Okay, so we have Glenn and then Raul, and anybody else? I'll just take them now. So Glenn, Raul, and I see one more in the back. Okay, so 3 more, and then we'll wrap up. Over to you, Glenn.
Thank you very much, Lily. This is Glenn Pierce-Soros with Sustainable Energy for All. And the one data point that I still cannot get my head around is this Mozambique data point, which is 83% of the population is at high risk. And so that's mind-boggling. And I'm trying to figure out, and my question is to both Yves Laurent as well as to Rama, I'm trying to figure out how can we move this urgency into the financing discussions that are currently taking place. And I ask Yves Laurent particularly because in Paris about a month ago, there was a summit to reform multilateral financing. What might be some of the entry points in that discussion to make sure that sustainable cooling is not marginalized in terms of financing needs? And the same, perhaps, Rama, any reflections on what can be done at COP28 beyond the global cooling pledge, which is excellent, but how to get this mainstreamed into the financing discussion that will happen in COP28 as well?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, we can answer that question in 2 ways. You're saying besides the Global Cooling Pledge, but I really think that the Global Cooling Pledge is a very powerful tool to be able to get more and more countries on board. You use that example of Mozambique. I didn't know that statistic, but it is very interesting. So it's through this effort that you're going to get nation states and member states to be able to come in and say, okay, what are the issues? How are we addressing it? And we are, as much as possible, making sure that the countries that we are, reaching out to in terms of the pledge are not, geographically centered in one place. We are making sure it is as diverse as possible. We're speaking with India. We're speaking with Denmark, who's one of our champion countries as well. But with that point, maybe then that's a valuable thing for us to make note of, to reach out to Mozambique, to see what is the issue there. Why is it 83% of the population at high risk? That is something that we need to be able to address. In terms of the financing part of the question, this is where I think it goes back to Luciano's question on the interlinkages with the energy system. Right? I think there was a statistic that was released by the Cool Coalition that said if we address sustainable cooling properly, we could avoid up to $1 trillion needed in energy investments. That's a major number, and it's a huge oversight that a lot of the energy sector does not currently consider, right? It is exactly as Yves Laurent said, you know, the peak demand for energy in France shifted from winter to summer, which is insane if you think about it. But it really shows that it is the invisible strain on the energy system that exists, and it's through investments in sustainable cooling that you can also work towards the energy transition, right? So it's these conversations. We all know that everyone wants to invest in energy right now, and energy is the biggest topic. But it is this point that is overlooked, and no one's really addressing it besides the people here in this room. And it's through these points, I think, and really bringing it to the forefront of all of these conversations and climate action and the energy transition, making sure people are aware. Because again, as a lot of people have talked about, cooling touches all aspects. It touches mitigation, resilience, adaptation. It touches health. It touches productivity. You know, it is actually one of the most wide-ranging sectors you can address and get the biggest return on your investment, essentially. And, you know, obviously we're starting now by bringing this to the attention of member states, but it's through that as well that the work will continue in making sure that it goes into the finance sector, it goes into the energy sector, the health sector, and that it really becomes a part of the conversation across all of these different sectors and communities. So I hope I answered your question, but again, I'd love to work with you guys to you know, work that out as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rama. And I think Yves Laurent is also directed at you.
Maybe a few points. I think first thing is, of course, sustainable cooling will need advocacy. So what we're doing here, what you're doing is the right way to do it. I think as the growing demand and the consciousness is really, everything is really growing on the cooling question. So I think it will advocate for itself in terms of energy producing, in terms of energy efficiency of appliances and all and technology. I would seize the opportunity, and I think what needs advocacy is stop doing unsustainable cooling demand. I see many projects of unsustainable cities with no trees in southern countries. I see many unsustainable projects of buildings with huge glazing that would produce if it's there, I don't know what's the word in English, I'm sorry, that would produce a growing energy demand. So I think those two sides are absolutely necessary, and obviously the advocating for this for stopping unsustainable investment is key. That's I just I mean development banks, investors, funds are still funding unsustainable projects, and this is creating a huge energy demand that Brian was describing.
Thank you. Is there any other panelists that want to respond to that? No? Okay. So we have 7 minutes, and in that before I hand over to Brian, and in that 7 minutes, we have 2 more questions, and I want to give the panelists 1 minute to give a concluding remarks. So may I ask you to keep your questions really succinct? Because I want to give you the opportunity to ask the questions I promised I would, but go ahead. It was Raul and you, sir. So Raul, would you like to go first?
But you answered his question.
What?
You wanted to comment on the...
I wanted to comment on the question which he had raised, but I think you have covered it while speaking. So I just wanted to give an example of one of the state, Maharashtra in India, where the Electricity Regulatory Commission introduced the peak and non-peak tariffs for cooling. Yeah, and what they did was, if you see the tariff for commercial consumers,
Raul, I know it's a really great story for everyone to hear, but I don't want the guests to not have a minute to give their report.
I will take it one-on-one.
But maybe you can follow up after. Is it okay? I think everyone now knows that Maharashtra did a really great policy on peak power, right? I think that's what you were saying. Okay, I'm so sorry. If I may move to your question, just to keep time, I have to.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I am Manoj. I am part of the innovation community on affordable heating and cooling of buildings.
Sorry, I can't hear.
So I just want to speak about default settings of cooling appliances. Like when cooling will be coming out, like as Brian pointed out, there is a need for cooling for a lot of people. Those people would not have been accustomed to conditioned climates, and they will have a higher temperature in terms of thermal comfort. So some thinking in terms of raising the temperature settings of these appliances, the cooling solutions, will drastically decrease the energy requirements in terms of peak load also. So if they could include it, and you can tell the viewpoints regarding that.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think India has done exactly that and is a champion in that. So maybe in his concluding remarks, Arijit can say a few minutes about it. We have 5 minutes, so just respecting everyone's time, I will now hand over to our panelists to give us concluding remarks and any advice you would give to people here and other leaders on how to strengthen international collaboration on sustainable cooling. So I will start with you, Arijit, since you seem ready to go.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we had a very nice discussion and a very thrilling one. So just wanted to highlight a couple of points. One is, of course, we have spoken about behavioral change and raising awareness, which is extremely crucial in our drive for sustainable cooling. And I think in this regard, the LIFE campaign, the Lifestyle for Environment campaign, which was initiated by our Honorable Prime Minister last year, is a great step. And I think if everyone we can try and popularize that campaign, it will lead to a great way in achieving the whatever we're talking about, like the public awareness and other things. And one of the things, of course, answering to your queries, in India we already have this practice of minimum setting of at 24 degrees centigrade for air conditioners. And we have also kind of popularized that campaign by advertising in the form that for every degree of less of temperature, we are actually saving almost 6%. So that's how we, but I think even if we look at the success of our standards and labeling program, it has been mainly through the public awareness that has been generated. Nowadays, I mean, if we look at 10 years back, it was very difficult to convince people to buy a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star air conditioner. But now it's just the opposite. People go to a shop and they ask for a higher star rated air conditioner or a higher star rated products. And that has been achieved only through public awareness. So I would definitely, my key message will be that public awareness will play a key role in our movement towards sustainable cooling. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we start with you, Ravindra?
So thanks for a great discussion, questions and comments here. So in international cooling collaboration, 2 thoughts that come to my mind and how we can accelerate these initiatives. There is a saying that lead by example. And the one important activity that all stakeholders and starting with leaders can do definitely this is join and support the global cooling pledge. Okay. So this is a very important activity at a leadership level that they should encourage signing the global cooling pledge and encourage other countries, the private players, stakeholders to do the same. This will show a great commitment at the top level. Second is setting very clear, achievable and realistic timelines to achieve sustainable development goals by encouraging sustainable cooling solutions. So those target has to be clearly mentioned along with the timeline and with better clarity in terms of what we want to achieve in sustainable cooling solutions. So I think that is a message I would like to share in the forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you could hand over to Biete.
Thank you for that. I think in the world we see like a kind of energy crisis, also combined with increasing demand for cooling and also the electrification of vehicles and so on, that makes it even more important to have very energy effective solutions on cooling. And also, of course, as mentioned many times today, natural-based solutions. And I think for Norway and for all countries working with good cooling systems, it will be important to share the knowledge and use it like in projects like in IndyPlus to cooperate with companies, with partners, with universities in other countries, to work with maybe small pilots sometimes that can be upscaled and used, like the CO2 using for cooling that we use in IndyPlus. That is very common in Europe, and it hasn't been used as much in really hot countries like India, but we are now working to see how it can be used also in India. So to share the knowledge will be really important. I'm really looking forward to the Cooling Pledge work, and wish you good luck with that.
Thank you. Yves Laurent.
Yeah, I would say as an advice, keep energy for what it is useful. Don't use energy for things that are obviously not useful. And cooling an air that is already naturally cooled should be our priority to me. We are facing a huge question, obviously. Solutions will be of all kinds, technologic, energy efficiency, passive, sufficiency, decarbonizing energy. This will require work of all stakeholders together. Financing will not succeed without users without architects, architects without engineers, engineers without governments without local authorities. So all stakeholders will be and will have to be together involved. And of course, international cooperation is key, because solutions will have to travel as climate travel. GHG travels, climate travels, and solution will have to travel. So at this regard, I just want to advertise a little for my side event tomorrow on international cooperation on building questions. No, it's not tomorrow, it's on the 22nd. It's on the program. Thank you. This is to say I'm not saint, okay?
Yeah, no, okay, it's okay. Sneha, yeah, I can give you this one. Another quick anecdote, Lily, I'll be very quick. So, on a recent plane ride, the gentleman sitting next to me asked what I did for a living. Once I explained to him, he looked at me a little bit puzzled and said, "Sounds interesting, but it's not my cup of tea. I'm a businessman and money talks to me." So after a few seconds of silence, I just felt compelled to politely explain to him why it was everybody's cup of tea. He has young kids. I don't know how much of it sunk in, but it made me realize that, you know, while there are brilliant minds in this room and in this industry, but with all due respect, I think somewhere we've failed to really make this relevant to the common man. And I feel going forward, that's very, very important. I think Arijit also raised that point. And really messaging it in a way that resonates with people. For example, you know, a business case for the business-oriented people and for utilities. Not necessarily everyone is going to relate to environmental stewardship. So meeting people or messaging to people how it matters to them, I think that's a very important thing. And also, I feel as a community, we still haven't solved the puzzle of unlocking financing. I think that still remains a very important lever that we haven't, or a puzzle that we haven't yet solved. So that's another area where we should focus on.
Thank you.
Thanks, and thank you, Sneha, for talking about people, because that's where I would also want to come in. I think when any collaborative works, whether it be on energy efficiency, cooling, it shouldn't just be about the technology, about the models, about the business cases, but also about the people. So I think that's where a collaborative would really build on, where people are at the center of what the collaboration is working towards. And again, following up on what Sneha said, get ground level voices heard. And I think that's what a collaborative would really, a collaborative, an international collaborative, where it's just not about international countries and just not the nations, but even the subnational local solutions. And we have Maharashtra for an example. Let Maharashtra showcase what they've done, and let that be a showcase to the international level. So I think people and local solutions is my key takeaway. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, really quick.
Adding a really quick one. Also bringing in cooling, building a pipeline of professionals, bringing in cooling into the curriculum. For example, the architecture industry and the building professionals, just the new breed of professionals that'll come in should already be thinking in an integrative way about this. So, thanks.
Yeah, so what I take from all of this is we need a whole of society, whole of government approach to meet the transition. We have the very significant importance of international collaboration, to transfer knowledge and expertise and to elevate the agenda. And we need to not forget about people awareness, looking at the example of life. And we really need to think about thermal comfort and the importance of this for people. One thing that struck me on this panel, I think we should all take away, is that in 2003, politicians lost their jobs because they didn't handle the heat stress problem properly in France, is what I heard from Yves Laurent. And if we remember that story and we tell all our politicians that that happened, maybe that will raise the ambition on the Global Cooling Pledge towards COP28 and also unlock finance and help us move this agenda forward. I just want to thank all of our panelists and especially would like to really thank the Government of India and Bureau of Energy Efficiency, who's been supporting the Cool Coalition and UNEP and all of us and the COP28 on the cooling agenda this year through their G20 presidency. So thanks for that. And thank you to all our panelists. Just a round of applause, and then I'm going to hand it to Brian. Thank you. Wow, thank you. Inviting Brian to the stage to give us closing remarks.
There we go. I think Lily basically summarized everything, but I think what I'd just like to pull together is that the data shows that we are at a point of tragedy, and let's learn from that tragedy just like France did. And let's come together on the 6th of December for the Global Cooling Pledge. So I just leave it at that, really. Lily did a great summary, so time for the photo.
Okay. Sorry, wrong instructions, I thought. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian. Round of applause to Brian.
Yeah.
All right.